We'll continue Choshen Mishpat and סימן from where we stopped last time. We're holding at Seif Yud, and we go through Yud Zayin now. Also, each one of these has practical elements to it, and we'll focus on the practical points that are relevant to it. In Seif Yud, the din is that a person cannot dig different kinds of holes in the ground which collect water, or which are there to collect water for irrigation, different kinds, and not a pool of water that's used for washing clothing if it's too close to the wall of your friend, unless the Mechaber says, unless you make a harchake of 3 tfachim and also you cement the inside of it, so that way it's going to prevent the water from seeping through it and ruining your friend's wall. That's the Rambam and Rabbeinu Yoina. That in the previous seif that you need harchake and you have to cement the inside of the hole, even in a kaisel avonim. And according to the Rosh and the Tur, it's enough to just do harchake and you do not need to cement the inside. But if it's with bricks, then you have to cement the inside. That's what the Smeh says right away. That's how the Smeh understands the Rosh and the Tur. The Shach says that it doesn't. That even according to the Rosh, even by bricks and not by rocks, it's enough to also just do harchake, just the 3 tfachim without cementing the inside of it. If you look in the Ramah and Seif Yud, it's pretty clear that he takes the position that one or the other is enough, either harchake or cementing the inside. Now, this whole discussion whether you have to do both or one is enough, the Ktsois and Sifkot and Hey right away tells you this whole thing is b'diavad. L'chatchila you need both. And that's what the Ktsois writes in Sifkot and Hey, and he explains it more in Seif Yud in Sifkot and Zayin over there, the Ktsois. In the case of Boir,
in case of Bar and case of Bin, he says that only in case of Bar needs to offer
yeah. Yeah, so he says over here it's only b'diavad. He says, but the l'chatchila you should do when it comes to the Boir, you have to do both.
Yeah, right.
And if you do one only, even though so what the discussion over here is if you do only one, but do Bezdin force him to do the second one or they don't, and that's what and he says that we don't because ultimately it's a suffix since it's a machlekes and suffix lekula. And if it's a kaisel binyan, he says that's not a issue. Even the chatchila you could do one because there is no, in the Gemara, there's no suffix regarding kaisel binyan, and therefore it is both. Therefore, either one of them, the chatchila, is fine. The same thing is also the Nesivos quotes him in Biurim Sivkot and Yud and says the same thing. If you look in Avnei Choshen in Sivkot and Zayin, he asks a question, Sai on the Ktsos and Sai on the Nesivos, obviously because the Nesivos follows the Ktsos, that in a kaisel binyan, that the kaisel binyan, he says that l'chatchila one is enough, and he brings from the Shara Mishpat, that means the Avnei Choshen brings from the Shara Mishpat, that really there is no difference between kaisel binyan and this one, and in both of them, l'chatchila you're allowed to do just one, if you do the distance and you don't cement the inside of it. Why? And the logic of the Shara Mishpat is as follows. Once you dig the hole, you could do harchake is enough. You don't need to put the cement. Why? He says once you dig the hole, this is first he says why harchake alone is enough, and he's going to explain why only sod besid is enough. He says harchake is enough because when you dig a hole, afterwards, the first thing you do is dig a hole. So you dug it three tvachim away. You became the muchzik now in the hole. So now you to put the cement afterwards. Now it becomes that the other guy wants to be moitzi from you the expense of the sid, and therefore you're not chayav to do it because ultimately there's a suffix, and we're not moitzi mamim suffix. And if you dug it close, less than 3 tefachim away, and you did put the cement, it means again you only did one of them. Also, you don't need archake. Why? Because the only time you need archake without cement is when you need archake and cement, or you need archake is when you're going to fill it up with water because you have a chashash that the water is going to go through. Now, I dug a hole, and I put cement around it, and then it was too close to the wall. At this point, I still didn't fill it up with water. That means there is no hezek yet. And therefore, I became a muchzak in an empty hole in the ground. And I became a muchzak in an empty hole in the ground. The fact that later I'm going to put water into it means at that point, the other guy is going to become the teveya. I'm already the muchzak, and there's a suffix, and you're not going to be moitzi moment for me to fill it up and dig a new hole. And that's what he says, whether it is in kaisel levenim, kaisel binyan, kaisel avanim, kaisel bird, all the cases where there's a suffix, when it comes to digging a hole, you dug a hole next to it, you did one and you didn't do the other one. In all cases, it is considered that you are b'diavad, it's fine. And not only b'diavad, even the chatchila is fine, because ultimately the moment you do it, you become a muchzak, and the hezek only comes in these scenarios. You become a muchzak before the tviyah occurs, and there's a suffix, and therefore it is mutter. Not only that, he adds also that ultimately there's even a suffix. If there's going to be bichlal a hezek, all this is archake, and there's a suffix if it's going to be a hezek. Not only you're a muchzak, there's also a suffix if there's going to be a hezek coming down the line afterwards. Since there's a suffix, there's going to be a hezek coming afterwards, therefore one of them is enough. And the Shara Mishpat and the Avnei Choshen, which brings the Shara Mishpat, says that if you look in the Pischei Teshuvos, we've gotten down what Rabbi Akiva Eiger writes over there in the beginning, the big Rabbi Akiva Eiger that we discussed in the past, you're going to see it, you're going to die from Rabbi Akiva the same thing. Rabbi Akiva Eiger the same thing. Pischei Teshuvos, you've gotten Daled.
Do you have to be marked an empty bar?
Huh?
Do you have to be marked an empty bar? I'm saying the reason why I said it won't be enough. You say you're maxing empty bar immediately. Don't you have to be marked an empty bar too? Before you put in water? You
have to be marked because you're going to weaken the karka. But if you...
And Sid, I think, I don't remember what I saw, but Sid also would help in that case for...
Sid does help. It's stabilize the ground. That's what he says. One is enough. Because once you dug it, lav dafka is going to be water in it afterwards. So you dug it close, and you put Sid over there, so you strengthen the ground is not going to collapse, the wall is not going to collapse, so you're fine. Now, the way that we mentioned before that the way the Ktsas explains, everybody understands it, and that the machloikas between the Rambam and the Tur, the Rambam ben Yoina on one side, the Rosh and the Tur on the other side, whether you need both or one of them is enough when it comes to Kaisel Avonim, is based on the understanding that according to the Rambam, the Gemara was metaretz that you need both, and therefore both of them are required, and that's the halacha. And according to the Rosh and the Tur, the Gemara was not machriya, and therefore sfeika is a suffix, and you don't need to, and therefore you could do only one of them. The Gra and Sifkat and Ches says no. Both of them are side the Rambam, side the Rosh, hold that there's no achra in the Gemara. The reason why the Rambam requires to do both is because the Rambam, I'm paraphrasing what the Gra writes, because the Rambam and the Rosh, their disagreement between them is when you have a suffix in these kinds of halachas, is it a suffix momen or is it a suffix isur? According to the Rambam, it's a suffix deiraisa l'chumre. Why? Because the suffix isur of being mazik. So therefore, the isur of damaging somebody is a deraisa, and it becomes a suffix deraisa l'chumre, suffix isur. According to the Rosh, it might be a deraisa, but it's only a suffix moment. It's not it's only a question of financial. Since it's a question of financial, so in such a case, even if it's deraisa, we say sfeika lekulo, which means it's basically the way the Gemara understands is the machlokes. How do you define sfeikas and archokas nezikin? Do you define sfeikas and archokas nezikin as a suffix deraisa in a isur, or as a suffix deraisa in momin? Now the Ramah then continues in the same seif and says, Yashemrim, that even if there's the water inside this hole that you dug, einam kvuim, I'm assuming we're going to see what exactly that means. For example, he says a pipe that sends water outside. You also have to make a distance that where the water falls should be more than 3 tfachim away from your friend's wall, the neighbor's wall. V'yesh chelkim, and some people that are chelik and they're matir. Right, now, what is exactly this pipe that we're talking about? The lashon of Ramah is tziner hashefeches mayim lebachutz, which simple explanation would mean that you have in your house, you have a sink and you pour water, and then you didn't have a drainage system, so it fell out to the back. However, most people understand that it's talking about a gutter. If you have a gutter out of your house for the rainwater, then it's also to do it, according to the first shitta, it's also to do it that it falls within 3 tfachim, and according to the first shitta, according to the second shitta, it's mutter. And who explains that this is talking about, who clearly writes it's talking about a gutter?
So you're saying it's not, according to the other tradition, it's not talking about a bar. There's no bar there.
No, the Ramah doesn't say it's a bar. The water is falling down. It goes into this bar, yes? But where does this mayim sheinam kvuim come from? Or something similar to it, that the tziner is pouring it out. So you look in the Alter Rebbe. The Lashon Alter Rebbe in this moment, see if you dal, it says, V'chein asur lishpech mayim, you're not allowed to pour water, afilu derech mikra, even on a non-irregular basis, v'pochis megimel tfachim, less than 3 tfachim away from your friend's wall. So the first thing is, he's talking about lishpech mayim. You're pouring water. It means you're doing an action with your own hands. And that's where he says it's asur. This is based on the first shitta of the Ramah. And so that's how he understands the first shitta of the Ramah. Lishpech, right? Because tziner hashayfech mayim. However, the Alter Rebbe continues, v'lochein, therefore, if you have a pipe which directs the water away from the roof, you have to distance it away. It should fall 3 tfachim away from your neighbor's wall. Even though this rain only falls during rainy season, so it's might not be derech harai, or derech mikre, but it's not a kavua. So she'enam kavuim, the way the Alter Rebbe understands the Ramah, means something which is not a hezek tmidi, but still he says, according to the first shittah, this is how he starts, the first shittah, which is the shittah in the Ramah, the first one, that you can't pour water, and you can't have a gutter which directs water, which is not going to fall every day. It doesn't rain every day. Which means not only you're not allowed to pour, you're not allowed to cause that rain should pour in that direction. It's not only, and that's, so to speak, your action is causing that damage, even though you're not the one that's bringing the water down from heaven, but you put the pipe over there which directs the water there. Yeah, now, by the way, the Aruch HaShulchan, which... We'll get to it soon. Alter Rebbe still didn't paskin on this thing. Then the Alter Rebbe continues. Depends. The walls today also can be a problem. For Yesh Matirim, the Alter Rebbe brings the second shitta. Yesh Matirim. במים שאינם קבועים. If it's מים שאינם קבועים יש מתירים. For example, he says, לשפוך שפכין לפחס מגימל טפחים סמוך לכוס לחברי, that you could pour the waters that you finished using less than 3 tefachim away, but the Alter Rebbe explains why. מפני שהם קולים לאלתר. If you don't do it on a regular basis, you're going to pour some water, you're not having a pipe that directs all your water out, but you filled up a bucket or something and you poured it out outside, the amount of water you're going to pour for this calling the altar is going to disappear quickly, and therefore it's not going to cause any real damage. Which means even the way you understand the second shit is not that you could do something that you could have non-regular water going there every once in a while. It means if one time you need it, 1 or 2 times you have to pour something out, and you didn't go, and you're not going to go 3 tefachim away, it's not the end of the world because it disappears right away, and it's not going to cause any damage. Which
Both the Rama and the other. Takes both.
No, this is how he brings a second opinion. The way he explains the second opinion is also in such a way that's not as the simple reading of the Rama. The first opinion, he says, in the first opinion that he quotes the same people that Rama quotes. He says the first opinion means that you can't do with your hands pour water, and you can't cause. And the second one says you could pour, but only in a way that's not going to cause damage to the altar, and that is, it's not going to cause damage because I'm calling the altar. That is the second opinion of the Rama. Soon the end of it, you're going to see the paskins that you shouldn't. Yerei Shamayim Yachron Latzmik Esvara Rishayna. That's what he paskins. Now, I mentioned before about that is if you need both harchaka and sod besid, and just by the way, if you look in the Aruch HaShulchan and if you look in the Aruch HaShulchan, it's also mashma from the Sivis that l'kuli alma harchaka would be enough for this thing. That means when we're talking about the second case of what's brought in the Ramah, the Machlekes in the Ramah, and you're going to follow the second opinion of Yesh Matirim, or you're going to even follow the first opinion that you have to do Archake. The Aruch HaShulchan says that L'Kuli Alma you don't need Sod Besid when it's Aroi. But even if you're going to say you want to be machmir, that you don't need, according to the first shita that's b'derech aroi, it will obviously only mean in places where the rain is also aroi. You have rainy season, you have non-rainy season. Places where it rains a lot more and it causes damage on a regular basis, then it's no longer begeder mayim she'einam kvui. Mayim she'einam kvuim is talking about when even the rainy season is not a standard, it's only a few months of the year, and that's why you don't have, that's why you could say it's aroi. If it rains every day, if it rains every other day, then you can't say that it's b'derech haroi. It already becomes kavua. But if it's b'derech haroi, archok is enough, and you do not need gimel tfachim. So if somebody has a sprinkler system, a sprinkler in his the watering system, sprinklers in his front yard, that spritzes rainwater, spritzes water to water the grass, it gets absorbed in the ground right away, and it's not that much water. So according to the first shitta, the way the Alter Rebbe understands it, it would still be aser. According to the second shitta, if it falls within 3 tefachim, according to the second shitta, it would not be a problem because it's calling la'alter, unless you understand that kavua, mayim she'einam kavuim, kavua means the actual hezek is kavua. Over here, it's a steady thing. Every other day, they do. You have to water your grass.
These days, with all these hazekas of mine, we hold like.
Depends on the situation. There's water damage. If somebody has gutters that are not good, it could damage the foundation. If it falls in a certain way, it depends how your foundation is. Water does damage. That's why hurricanes are dangerous. One of the reasons is because side the wind and side the rain. Water does damage. Wind does even more damages.
It's a lot more water. It's a hurricane.
Depends what. Huh?
It's not a sprinkler.
I understand, but the water could cause damage. I'm saying is a steady water could damage if you have a gutter that falls, because they tell you have to keep the water away from the foundation for that reason. If water falls by the foundation on a regular basis, it's going to cause damage.
But did you say something the other day about when the walls go into the ground?
Yes, then you have less you have to calculate. That's why it says that Amos says over there that Ramon Dusif continues and says that even a boat which has no water at all, you're not allowed to dig it close to your friend's property, and you have to be mesakin kefiha umanim apkim. You have to fix it kefiha umanim apkim is the professionals. That means when it comes to these kinds of things, you have to find from the professionals what kind of damages. You could dig a hole next to it. You want to dig, you have to know what you have to do, and you have to fix the damage according to the professionals.
Well, with a sprinkler system, their average sprinkler system that you put in your front yard
doesn't cause damage. If it's not soaking the earth, see, it's not going to cause any problems.
Doesn't the average regular sprinkler?
Doesn't cause damage. No. Now this Ramah over here is based on the Rashbach El Gimel Siman Kufnun Zayin, which over there he says if you did damage, obviously you have to pay the damage, right? But what does it mean? What damage do you have to pay? Let's say I dug a hole, and the amount and that caused the wall to get weak, and and a piece of it fell down. Does that mean that right now I have to fix the top of the wall which fell down, or does that mean that I have to go now and pay $30,000-$40,000 to dig up under and put underpinnings and foundations and strengthen the foundation? So if you look in Erech Shai, Sifkat and Aleph on this Siman, he says the chiyuv to correct is only what you actually damaged. That means if the wall cracked certain parts, you'll fix where the crack is. But it doesn't mean that you have to actually fix the whole foundation of the wall.
Why would you have to fix the foundation?
Because you weakened the foundation, right?
So wasn't that a part of the hezek?
No, because then you could that's what he says. The hezek is what you see as a hezek. The fact that later is going to be other hezekas, maybe you'll fix those hezekas afterwards. But you don't have to, because what's the only way you're going to be able to fix it? By filling up your hole, right? To strengthen the earth, because you took the earth away. So yes, you don't have to do that. That's what Erech Shai says. He says what the Ramah says. It's talking about the Erech Shai. The Erech Shai says you don't have to fix that amount of damage. That's regarding Seif Yud. Now we're going to move to noise damage. Again, we see this in other places. We're going to see it in a few places in Shulchan Aruch. Seif Tezvav says somebody who grinds wheat in a mill, and therefore by him moving the mill, it causes the wall to shake. He has to distance it. That's not it's not noise. I mean, it causes him to move. You have to do it. And how much is the shaking that creates damage? The Mechaber says that it shakes. That if you have a barrel of wine with a cover on it, and the cover is not sealed on it, it's not cemented, and by you doing that's going to cause the cover to shake off the barrel, then that's already asur. By the way, if you look in the Smeh points out to you, it says obviously doesn't mean inside the house of your friend. It means on the wall, because what are we worried about? You're going to knock the wall down. So when you want to measure how much shaking causes damage to the wall, you have to put the barrel on top of the wall and then see if it's going to fall off or not. But other people understand this, but the simple reading is no, it's in the house of... that's how the Smeh understands it, which means that even according to the Mechaber, it's not as much as it doesn't mean it have to shake the whole house. The Ramah says it doesn't have to shake the cover off the barrel, but as long as the wall is shaking as a result of it, even if it's not going to be enough shaking to knock off the cover, it's still asur. And if you caused hezek from the shaking of the wall, you have to pay. Why? Because the hezek came as a result of your action. It's mishum chitzoi, like a fire, like a arrow.
The Father's opinion is that the cover has to shake.
Shake, yeah.
Fall off.
Because shakes, we're moving around on it, not fall off. Yeah, it shakes off.
Fall off the barrel.
No, it's a shaking on top of it, yeah. the way according to the Ramah, you don't have to put a barrel. You put a small kad next to the wall. It has a smaller one, and to see if the cover on that one shakes.
Who said it? You have a small.
One of the Mefarshim, I don't remember what it was. Now, if you do, if somebody does repairs in his own house, obviously he has to bring some machines, he has to bring machinery, so you have to be careful which machines you bring are going to cause shaking to your neighbor's wall. Now, by the way, if it's a repair that is needed for you to live over there, there's a svara to say that the neighbor cannot be ma'akev you. Maybe you'll have to fix the damage afterwards if you cause damage. But whether to be ma'akev you or not, because over here someone can be ma'akev him from doing it. But if there's a repair which I need to do in my house, not something which I'm grinding wheat, that I could do it elsewhere. Something I have to repair in my own house. And for that I have to bring a machine that's going to break things, it's going to cause some shaking. So usually the sif is that you can't cause damage, you can't leave the person to be ma'akev you. Over here, the chayil according to the Svara is the person needs it to live. It's part of his dira, and therefore you would be able to do it. Now that's one Svara. Why are you allowed to do it? And the second Svara is something we mentioned from the Alter Rebbe in Sif Yutches last time when this came on. We're going to mention it again later today. I'm going to repeat the same Sif. Certain things about Hezek to B'nei Rishus Harabim, that if everybody agrees because everybody agrees to be mevater on certain things, so that way they also have the right to do it down the line. So in today's day and age, everybody understands that you're allowed to do certain repairs in your house because they're not going to stop you because they themselves also want to be able to do the same repairs in their house. Elamai, they're going to want to do there should be permits with the engineer to make sure that there's no damage. And that's the only thing. So they could be ma'akev you, let's say, if you want to do something without a permit and without an engineer and cause damage, then they could be ma'akev you. But if it's mitzad the din of haskama, if it's mitzad the din that you're willing to, that you need it for living and you're going to pay for the damages afterwards, then it's not a problem. Now, if you caused damage, so we say you have to pay, right? Now, what happens if your workers cause damage? That is a whole discussion whether shliach ein shliach l'dvar avera. If a guy is also the guy is not bedin shlichus, so maybe he is chayev. Yeah, according to the Sivis in Siman Kuf Pei Beis Biurim Sifkoten Beis and the Smen Siman Tafyut Ches Sifkoten Chav Zayin. If a guy who's not or anybody who's not bar shlichus does something on your behalf, you, the Mashaleach, are chayav. We don't say in Shlechet V'Laveda. So your worker does damage. You can't say, oh, the worker is the one that did the damage for me, and I was not the one who. It's not my responsibility. If I'm the one who's using the jackhammer, I'm chayav. But if I hire the worker to do it, then he's going to be chayav. Right? Now, it happens to be that legally, if you hire a proper worker with permits and they have to have insurance, the construction companies, and the reason for it specifically is that they are going to be responsible for damages that they do. But, and then you could go after the insurance. But when they go after the insurance, they go after the house insurance, the homeowner insurance, and the worker, and the company that did the work insurance. If you look at mitzad, if there's none of these things, who's going to be ultimately responsible? The one who hired the worker. Now, there is shittas which hold that a poyel who gets paid it's not medin shlichus, and therefore the owner who paid him is responsible, even if he is a yid. If you look in Pischei Choshen, Chelik Hey Perek Daled, Ha'ora Samach Zayin, and Chelik Vav Perek Aleph Ha'ora Mem Daled, you're going to see the whole lengthy discussion about this, and whether it's considered Bari Azeka or not considered Bari Azeka when you send somebody, and whether this is considered a grome or a garmi, and in both of them, and it was a grome or a garmi, and therefore the question is, could Bez be mechayev him momin or is chayev b'din hashemayim?
What's the meaning grome?
Grome indirect damages, and the grome is only chayev b'din hashemayim. The Ramah continues that even if the chutzner was built after that the mazik started doing his work, I mean, after the person started grinding his wheat, you still have to now do the distancing. And in the Sivis in Sifkot and Yudalef explains that even though usually, and we know it, that samach beheter, you're allowed to do it, so therefore this person started grinding wheat, and then the other person built next to him. Still, and over here, it's different. Why? Because A, you could be masalik the hezek bekal, you could move your mill a little bit further away so it shouldn't damage the wall. Second of all, this kind of hezek is a big hezek, the kutrim beisakise, which does not have a chazaka. Third of all, it's not the samach beheter is only for indirect damages, not for direct damages, mazik biyadayim. Over here, when you're actually using the machine, you are causing damage biyadayim to the person next door. Yeah, and the next thing is, over here, then he goes into a discussion and he says, the question, could you prevent him from doing it before he starts the work, or only after he starts causing damage? Could you be moiche before there's a hezek or not? He says that goes into the whole discussion of machlikas in the previous siman regarding the Rosh and the Rashba and everybody else, whether you could be moiche for something that started when the hezek is not there yet, before the hezek starts, because you're going to say, I don't want to go with you to Adon Torah, etc., or not. The whole machlikas over there, and he says you need to look over there and you'll see, and also how to understand the Rashba. And it happens to be that the Ulam Mishpat says that you could be ma'akev in these scenarios when the hezek is by hand, you could be ma'akev even before you start. It means you could be ma'akev the person to do even before he does the first time that he starts shaking, if you know it's going to cause damage. And yes, those are the reasons why samach beheter. Now, there still is a svara that if you moved there knowing that there's a factory over there that does the shaking, just like if you buy a house next to train tracks, you know there's going to be some shaking. So even though what we're talking about over here is that it's not something which happens the whole time, it's not something which is regular. It means he does it as part of his work, and you want to stop him from doing it, even though you did it in the past in your property, now the new property is there. But something which is apis svara, something which is common, it's a factory or it's a train, you can't move next to if a train, let's say a subway was owned by a Yid, and you lived in Borough Park, you can't go and tell the subway, I bought a house on McDonald Avenue, and the train that you put over there is shaking my house. I want you to stop to move the train to a different location. Put it underground or whatever it is. Or on Eastern Parkway, the same thing. You feel the vibrations of the trains going by when you're standing. You could sometimes feel them in the house also. I did see today somebody that says, I don't remember who the mocker is, that you could look at when it comes to one of this generation, that today, if you want to know if a wall is shaking, the shittas aramo, from these kinds of things, today that everybody has pictures hanging on their walls, picture frames, you could see in the picture frame what's going on, and he says, you see in earthquakes that you see, how do you know how strong the earthquake is? How much your chandelier and your pictures on the walls are shaking. So that's the siman. You don't have to sit find a cad or a barrel and put it on top of your wall and start looking how much exactly shaking it does. You could just look at the things that are hanging on your wall. Now the Ramah continues and says, this is based on the Rivosh, that if yesh choyli haroish lebal hachotzer, the bal hachotzer has choyli haroish, has a sickness, it gets headaches. And the noise causes him headaches, from the noise from this mill, so the mazik has to be marchik the hezek. And the Rivosh proves it from where it says later you could prove it from what it says later in Sa'ifim Aleph, Kol davar she'adua she'ein ha'me'arer yochel esavloi, anything which a me'arer cannot handle, af al pi sheshar b'nei adam soivlim oisoi, ein le chazaka keneged me'arer zeh. The lashon over there, Mem Aleph, is called Dover Sheyodua. So the Gra points out right away in Sif Mem Aleph and Sifkat and Kuf Yotes, obviously only if it's Yodua. Like, you know that it is what it is. But if it's not Yodua, then you can't do it. Now, a similar din also appears in Sif Lametes, that regarding someone who has a shlachtos, you put a shlachtos next to it, and then you have the oirvim, you have the ravens that come, they make to eat in the velus, and they smell the blood, and they make noise, and the person next to it is hoyo kapdon oy choyle shetzivtzuf hazeh mazikoi chayav avatel oisa hamelacha oy yarchik at shelo yavoli nezek mechamasa. That's what it says in Sif Lametes. Now again over there in the Barheite, in Be'er HaGoyla, Sifkot Nun, which is on Sif Lametes, he says, V'kosvu ha-mefarshim, v'hu shemuchzog v'noida she'ein daitei sevelis. So again, we're talking about, just like the grosses, it means it's not stam that somebody says it bothers me, and he wants to stop the other person from doing the noise. It has to be known, or it is known that he can't handle it. Now, in back to Sif Lametes a second, if you have over there, the Ramah continues, V'hu hadin, after he says about the noise from the raven, says, Hu hadin, kol nezek godlo shenadam yochel l'savla, any kind of big damage that a person cannot handle. Same thing he writes in Kuf Nun Vav Sif Beis, that that you could make as much noise as you want in your store, and the neighbors cannot be moiche. And then the Ramah says, "V'dafka bnei adam brim, avam hem choilim. If they're sick, v'akoil mazik lahem, and the noise causes damages to them, yichoilim limchois. They could be moiche." It's in the same rivash that's quoted over here in Seif, in Seif Tezvav that we just discussed. So we just see basically, first of all, if somebody wants to block somebody else from doing noise things next to him, first of all, the Ramah is talking about, over here he says, Yesh choyli haroish, and that's what he calls it. In Siman Kuf Nun Vav it says, Hem choylim, which means that you have to prove that the person is a choyle from it, not stam that it bothers him. And the Rivash, that's the mocker of the Ramah, it's mashma that it has to be proven. The Nizak has to prove it in Bezdin, and then he could say that the mazik has to be you have to be marchik the mazik. Second of all, we know already from the Gra and from the Be'er HaGoyla and Sif Lametes and the Gra over there, that has to be Yodua. If you look in Knesses HaGdoila, HaGoyis Beis Yosef Sifkot and Pei, he brings the Shitta of the Marival, Mari ben Lev, in Chel Gimel Siman Ayin Zayin, that if it's not known, then the person, it means it's not known, it's not something which is proven, then the person, the Nizak, is not Neman in Bezdin even with a Shvuah, to say that he has the sickness which causes him headaches. The next thing is, in all the source, the Knesset HaGdoila, HaGoyis Beis Yosef Sifkot and Pei, on this Siman, brings from the Shas HaTshuvas Mari ben Lev, Chele Gimel Siman Ayin Zayin. It seems like this din of noise, that you could stop your neighbor from doing noise, is only in business ventures. This Seif Tezvav over here is talking about somebody who's grinding wheat. Seif Lametes is talking about somebody who has a shlachtais. Siman Kuf Nun Vav, it says bechanusoi. However, if you live in your own house, you can't, and there's kids running around, you can't tell the parents the noise that your kids are making is giving me headaches, move out. What's the marker for this? Chazanish Siman Yud Gimel Sifkot Yud Aleph. That's how he explains it. The same thing, according to that, would apply not only to kids making noise, but if you have air conditioners and other appliances and dishwashers and other things that make certain amount of noise, and the neighbor complains about about those noises. Now, if it does shaking and stuff like that, it's a whole different din. Because you're allowed to, certain things, you might be allowed to do it, but you still be responsible for the hazekas. You have to remember, certain things are, you're not allowed to do it, and you can be ma'akavim. Certain things, you can be ma'akavim before or after it starts. Certain things you're allowed to do because you need to do them, because of tzorech dira, but you will be responsible for damages that come afterwards. Now the Shalas Tshuva's Karnei Re'im to Ankawa, Siman Kufchav Beis, says, when it says Choyle, that we know, we see from the Ramav here, Choyle in two places, Choyle Yarosh, it doesn't mean that you're going to, it doesn't specifically mean somebody who has this sickness that he will get a headache right away. But anything that you will do which is going to cause somebody to be sick is also asur. The only exception is if the person who is doing it needs it for his own refuah now, and then we say his own refuah trumps causing somebody else future chayli. Nesivis. He needs a machine that makes noise for his own refuah, yes. Whatever it is. Sometimes you might have some systems that the person needs. An oxygen generator, a big filter, I don't know. There's a lot of machinery which make noise, especially if you buy the cheap ones. And therefore, it's if he needs it for his refuah.
Does he have a right to get the coupons?
He has a right. If another person wants to pay the difference, he's going to rate. The hezek, I'm not causing you a hezek because I could do it. You're being hezek and you claim that I shouldn't have taken the one that insurance gave me and I have to pay an extra few $1,000s for the one that costs money. No problem, pay for it. Because I have a heter to do what I'm doing.
Or the only reason why you have a head is because you have a choice.
You don't have a choice. Because insurance gives you don't have the money. So in this moment, what are you going to do? Still, you don't have to spend money for these kinds of things. The Nesivis in Siman Kuf Nun Vav.
Technically, we always say you don't spend money like this now.
You don't have to spend money.
Well, you build a wall.
Because I started doing the hezek. We're talking about if somebody's sick and he needs it, right? We're not talking about someone who's not sick. No, someone who's sick and he needs it, and the other person says, so he has a heter to do it. Or it's something in the house that you have a heter to do it. Right? It's not a business. And the person says, I don't like the noise that's being from it. No problem. You could, there's a more expensive one, pay the difference. Then the Sivis and Siman Kuf Nun Vav, Chidushim Sifkot Zayin, says that if the neighbor was healthy, it was all good, and then something happened to him and he got sick, so he was meichel the noise. He was healthy. Down the line, a few years later, 10 years later, 12 years later, or the noise or whatever other hezek was done, he got sick. And now it bothers him. Now, according to Yodua, that it's going to cause him damage. Then that turns now into a hezek gadol that has no chazaka like kutra. And he could now, even though he let him and he was meichlim and he was healthy, now it's a new metzias that he's sick. He could stop him from doing it. The same thing is also an erech shai sifkot and daled. And the erech shai goes even further and says something which a lot of people who quote him don't understand what the logic is, that if I'm a healthy person, so I was meichel the noise, but then I brought into my house, let's say somebody that is a choyle, I introduced a choyle into the house, and that choyle bothers him, now that choyle could stop. That means Lord is a person who brings in, at some point in life, he brings in his parents retired into the house, and one of them is a choyle from these kinds of things. From that point on, he could stop the shachin who was already machzik that he could do the noise from doing noise weiter. Now, over here, when it comes to noise, it's even, like I mentioned before, that if you move next to a factory, you might not have a taina about, you built a house next to a factory, you might have a taina about, or the train station, you might have a taina about the things shaking. When it comes to noise, for sure it's like that. You know that there's a place that has noise, and you found out that there is noise, and you did not, and you knew you were makabel upon yourself to do it. Now, technically, yes, from the Ramah before, you could have said maybe he has to do it. But over here, when it comes to noise, when you moved in, you accepted upon yourself what's going to happen, whether it's the company that's there before the factory, or it's neighbors with kids. You know, you don't move into an apartment without looking. You came, you checked it. You know that there's 10 kids running around upstairs. You knew there's noise over there, so you have to live with it.
Who says that in your house?
What?
That if you build a house next to...
It's a svara. I'm telling you it's a svara. It's a svara. You agree to mechatchila. You can't start after. It doesn't make sense to do. The only thing is, the other cases when the Ramah says that you must faranfa, the Ramah is talking about either you didn't know about it, or you didn't do your proper research about it, or it's something which is that has started afterwards, etc. A general question for all these hazekas. We know there's a rivosh, I think it's a rivosh, and we discussed it 2 years ago in Hilchas Shabbos, and in Hilchas Pesach also, that last year in Mechilas Chametz, that schirus lezman memkarhu. Schirus, when you rent something, you become a tenant, becomes a owner for the time of his tenancy. Question becomes, when a tenant moves to a place and there's the hezek of noise next door, he's a chayla. A tenant, he's renting. Yeah, so you look in, there's a book called Zechayr Avram and Choshen Mishpat. It's one of the old, hard to read Rashi Asius books that were printed a few hundred years ago in Italy or in Turkey. And over there in Choshen Mishpat Ois Nun, he brings a Shalas Tshuvas, Hoin Rav, Choshen Mishpat Siman Yudala from Rav Nachmias, also talking about a few hundred years ago. Now, just as a side note, I mentioned it, and I mention it again. In Europe, for many years, or hundreds of years, it was usher for Bati Din to operate in financial cases, and you had to go to court. They had no jurisdiction. In Sephardic countries, you were allowed to. So if you look, there's a certain, from the time of the Marashdam till came out the time of the Chasam Sofer, the vast majority of Yisodis, the Ketshuvas, and Choshen Mishpat you're going to find by the Sephardic Rabbanan, not by the Ashkenazic. You look at Tzemach Tzedek, for example, the Choshen Mishpat is a thin volume, very thin, compared to Even Ezer, which is 2 fat volumes. Yeredeya is a fat volume. Erechaim, okay, is thinner. Look at other Tshuvas also. It's Bein Aroich. The Sephardic, I have some sets at home where Erechaim, Yeredeya, Even Ezer is 1 volume and Choshen Mishpat is 2 or 3. Or Even Ezer is 1 full volume and Choshen Mishpat is 1 full volume, Erechaim, Yeredeya is less than 1. For that reason. So just back to this, you have the Shas Tshuvas Hain Rav, Choshen Mishpat Siman Yudalev, that he discusses this question of a Seicher. And he over there says, how could you be Ma'akev? What right do you have to be Ma'akev? You're going to be Ma'akev him from now. You're renting. The other guy owns. So you're going to walk into here, you have a 12-month lease. In 12 months you're going to be out. What right do you have to be Ma'akev him now that you walk in here because of the noise? And he brings the Knesset Agdoila, Madura Basra, Siman Kuf Nun Hey, Hagoyes Atur Seif Zayin, proves from the Rashba that the Soicher has no right to be Ma'akev in these kinds of Niskei Guf, like these kinds of Hezekias, things that bother him, against a homeowner, against a neighbor who's a homeowner. A renter doesn't have that right. The Hain Rav says that nobody else discusses it except for the Rashba, so therefore the Rashba is a Deya Yechidah, and you should not rely on him, and a Soicher could be Ma'akev. But I'm telling you that doesn't make sense. The Rashba is the only one who discusses it, but nobody else disagrees with him. Nobody else discusses it, nobody else agrees with him, so therefore, l'cha'ira, he should not be able to be ma'akev like the Rashba. And Aruch HaShulchan Sifkat and Tezvav clearly says it like that the neighbor who's a homeowner has a right to tell the Seicher, you don't like it, go find a different apartment. And Sif Tezvav. Move to Seif Yud Zayin. Seif Yud Zayin discusses again gutters. Now, in this case, water, but from a different angle. Someone has a gutter from his house, and that the water doesn't fall into his neighbor's house, into his neighbor's chutzner. But the overhang of it is facing his neighbor. We're soon going to get into discussion if it's over his neighbor's property or only facing his neighbor's property. And he was machzik in it. That means the owner of the house was machzik his gutter. So according to the Mechaber, the moment you're machzik, you have a chazaka on the gutters, you have a chazaka on Daled Ames to put a ladder to clean the gutters. Why? If it's because for you have to be able to clean it, right? To get the water to continue flowing. And if the neighbor is the one that enjoys the water, like in Siman Kufnun Gimel, you still have to go up and clean it so the neighbor will be able to enjoy the water. Yeah, that's in Smesif Kotel Amites. Now, in Siman Kufnun Gimel, we learned that a person could build under his friend's gutter, under his neighbor's gutter. So, how can you say over here that you have to be Marchik Daled Ames? It's a Chayra Stira. The Smesif Kotel Melov says no. When Siman Kufnun Gimel Sif Ches, when he says you're allowed to build under a gutter, it means you could build as long as you leave space for the ladder to go up. The Ramah right away points out, Yesh Chalkim. Not everybody agrees that you could be cut, that you have a 4 Daled Ames space. He says that's a tur in the name of Tyson, but says the name of the Rosh. And the only way you could do it is if you have a taine that you were koine, the 4 Ames from your friend's chatzar, whether b'mechire or you're koine b'matane. That's what the Beir HaGoyla says, because the mokir of the Ramah, the Yesh Chalkim, the Tur is the Tur, and the Tur brings it in the name of Taisvis. And the Beir HaGoyla says, yeah, Taisvis says, how was it done? B'mechire b'matane. That's what konu imenu is. There's he says, I have a taina, it's a chazaka with a taina. That he purchased the right, or he got the right to go, the 4 amas to go up to the gutter. But without it, he has no right, there's no way he was able to be machzik Daled Ames in his friend's chatzar to be able to go up to his own gutter. Now the Prisha in Sifkat and Tazayin says that it seems like, according to what the Ramah, based the shit of the Ramah, that the Yesh Chalkim, that it only works, you would need 3 years. It's not Rav Shasak, you would need 3 years. And then, if you have Kinyan plus 3 years, Taisus would also hold that there is a chazaka. It doesn't mean that you cannot be machzik. The machlekes between the Mechaber and the Ramah is whether when you're not machzik, or what's the category of chazaka. According to the Ramah, according to the Mechaber, you're machzik. The Rambam, you're machzik when you build the gutters, and the other person was moichel the gutters. That gives you automatic 4 amas rights. According to the Taisvis, you need 3 years, and you need a taina with it of kinyan, whether it's kanu imenu or he got it as a matana. And the means the way the Prisha understands it is the machlekes between these two shittas, between the Tur Rosh on one side and the Rambam on the other side, is whether you're chazake, whether by you putting up a gutter you get and the other person saw the gutter, that he was moichel to you the gutter, so therefore he was also moichel to you the 4 amas, and it's automatic mechila rav shasak, or like just the general machlekes, or you need 3 years of the taina. The Grav here says no, Sifkat Menvav. He says the machlekes is, does a gutter give you automatic ownership on Daled Amas or not? easement rights, not ownership, automatic easement, the rights to use on 4 amas or not. He says the Mechaber, the Rambam hold that you have, that when you put up a gutter, that automatically gives you the right to access the gutter. It's not mitzat chazokah. You're not machzik the dalad amas. You're buying the gutter, you're putting up the gutter, and the gutter gives you that right. So the neighbor has to be moicha. According to the Ramah, putting up a gutter doesn't give you automatic rights for 4 amas. For that, you have to do a separate chazakah. Yes, you have a chazakah that the gutter could stay there, and soon we're going to see that's how the Tzemach Tzedek understands it also. One element of it. Yeah. Now, all this is l'cha'ira only if you. I'm just pointing this out to you. It's only if the gutter is overhanging on the friend's chatzar. So, because then the friend has a way to be meicher. If I build a gutter on my property and there's no overhang, but the access to that gutter is through the neighbor's property, what kind of mechal you could have done? If you can't be meicher, you can't be kain, according to certain opinions. So if you explain according to the Rambam, you would be koine only if it's on the friend's gutter, not if the other way. If it's on your own gutters, lav dafki, you would be able to be koine. Or if you understand it the way the Gra says, then even then you could be koine, because when you're standing, according to the Rambam, a gutter automatically gives you the access of 4 amas. In the Shalas of Tshuvas Tzemach Tzedek Choshen Mishpat סימן Chav Beis, which is page 55-56 in the White Book. It's a short tshuva, and you could look at it afterwards. Only a certain element of it is relevant. There's a story over there about a fight in Liadi between a buyer and a seller of a house. A buyer of a house purchased a house, a regular house, and purchased with it a certain amount of earth, of garden around it, of property, backyard. And how did he tell him? Let's say today the standard property lines over here in Brooklyn are 20 to 25 feet wide by 100 feet long. Yeah, that's the standard size. Now, how do you measure? And the front of the house is facing Rishus Harabim. The question is in the back of the house. Let's say the house from end to end is 50 feet. So how much would you have behind it? Another 50 feet, right? That's a svara. The Moicher says, I am measuring the 50 feet starting from where the roof ends. The roof has an overhang, that's an extra foot. Its overhang is on top of the Rishus Harabim, but still, it's yours. Therefore, I only have to give you 49 feet behind the house. And behind that is my property. The property line is going to be at 49 behind your house. The buyer of the house says, no, I want my full 50 feet behind because the house is 50 feet. And it ended up by the Tzemach Tzedek. The question. That was the argument. So there's a discussion over there if you're kind of the gag, the fact that you're kind of the gag or not. And the second paragraph that Tzemach Tzedek discusses brings a discussion that's relevant to here. And he says, even though it's not really the same din as a maschela, but you could say that the overhang has a similar din, and the maschela has a chazakah, but not the air that's under the maschela. Therefore, he says that you measure from the wall of the house, so then he's going to get 50 feet behind the house, not from what's in front of it. So then, why not? Because even when you have a maschela, when you have this overhang on top of your friend's property, then obviously you're not koine the air that's under it. You only koine, the only rights you have is your own, is to put that up. The person is not moichel to you the right to go a foot into his property. But he says, but over here, the front is facing Rishus Harabim. So therefore, you're not taking from your friend. All you're taking from is from Rishus Harabim. You're also a member of Rishus Harabim, so maybe you do have a right. Maybe we should measure only 49 feet behind and not 50 feet like you wanted. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, no, Reshus Harabim, Bnei Reshus Harabim, we're not moichel to you. They were moichel to you that your roof goes over their property. But suddenly you're going to come now and you're going to say that Reshus Harabim lost a foot. They were not matir. Which means the fact is having a gutter over, it means you could be machzik, whether it's the chazaka of a gutter is only a chazaka for the actual place where the gutter is, and not for anything that happens under it. Now, I just want to finish with something that Alter Rebbe says in the end of Seif Yud Zayin, Hilchos Niskei Momen, the end Seif Yud Ches, which I mentioned part of it in the previous year. Alter Rebbe is also in your white book. Alter Rebbe writes in the end of Seif Yud Zayin. This goes back to what we mentioned before about the noise. Im yesh l'shchenei choyli haroish. If a neighbor has choyli haroish, umazik le'koil haka, and it causes him damage. Koil haka causes him damage. L'yichte shrifa zekayetze b'zeh midvarim shekoil hakosem magia le'beit shchenei mazik le. Do not do these actions that cause noise, which is going to bring the noise to your neighbor's house, and your neighbor is going to have a hezek from it. Well, he uses pretty much the same lashon as the Rama, except for he says that the noise is magia lebeis shchena, which makes sense. It's enough noise. That means you can't say a slight noise. It's be enough noise that it's another element to here. Add another element to this nekuda. When a person comes and complains about noise, don't just accept the complaint. Find out how much noise is actually being made. How much noise could you hear over there? That's just, by the way, it's just a job for the Dayanim. There was somebody who once came. That was a Dentaira. I think I mentioned it over here in the past. Between a contractor and a house owner. The house owner claimed he doesn't want to pay the contractor for the roof. Why? Because he didn't fulfill the obligation. I said the story here probably 3 years ago. I don't think nobody here remembers it from then. Maybe 4 years ago, the beginning of Kaila. He said, he want to build a flat roof on top of his house. So you could put up a sukkah over there. You could have beach chairs, whatever it is. And the contractor built the flat roof. He said, I don't want to pay him. Go to Bezdin. Why don't you want to pay him? It's an expensive job. He did not fulfill the commitment. So what do you mean not fulfill the commitment? The roof is not straight. The roof is not straight is a big thing, right? The contractor told the Rabbanim, the Bezdin, I'm not going to respond now. I want to go to the place. The Bezdin should go to the roof. Let the Bezdin go to the roof, and then I'll respond over there. So fine. He has a taina, so the Bezdin should come see. He says, whatever I'm going to answer, you're not going to understand until you're on the roof. He says, you're not makchish, not done anything. No, I'm not answering. I'm not going to say something until you go there. They go up on top of the roof. They all went. It's not far. It was in Bar Park to Bar Park. They go up on top of the roof, and you stand on the roof. It looks flat. The contractor now tells the Rabbanim, I'm not being makchish. I'm moida. The roof is not straight. Roof is not straight. How do you know? He says, look, it's pitched towards the gutter, towards the pipe that brings the water down. So it can't be straight, because otherwise the water is going to sit over there. It's got to be pitched. When he says straight, he means straight that he could use. And that's straight that he could use. It has to be just a slight pitch down. So that's called straight. So when you look, if someone says, how's this? Someone says it's noise. What's the definition of noise? Noise could be that's booming. Noise could be a very slight noise over there. So you have to find out. Don't jump to conclusions based on what somebody tells you. Because it could be true. The guy is the one who makes noise is going to be moida. Yes, I have machinery that makes noise. But there's no way he hears it over there. I make noise, but it's across the street. It's far away across. It's 2 blocks away. How could he hear it? You have to find out. Because otherwise he can't be makchish. And if he's moida, it's a problem. So you have to do your research and find out. Anyways, Alter Rebbe then continues in Seif Yud Ches, something which I already said before, that in the middle of Seif Yud Ches, chen kol kayetze b'zeh, tzorech lizoyer, shelo ligrem nezek mimaisov l'shchenoi, or libnei reshus harabim, can't be cause any damage from your actions, elam ken mochal lo yishchenoi, unless it's a mechila. Ushsika ke mechila min hastam, ushsika usually is like mechila. Elohim kin yodua she'eino moichel b'leiv shalom, unless you know that his mechila is not a full, complete mechila. And Alter Rebbe adds, mechila umatana she'eino b'leiv shalom eino klum. Mechila and matana, which are not done b'leiv shalom, are nothing. What's the makar of the Alter Rebbe for this? From a smeh in Siman Reishman Beis of Cotton Aleph. But the smeh doesn't talk about mechila. Smeh only talks about matana. That matana is not b'leiv shalom, it's not a matana. The Alter Rebbe adds it, compares matana and mechila one to another. Just like by matana, if it's not b'leiv shalom, it doesn't work anything. Mechila, also, if it's not b'leiv shalom, it doesn't do anything. So when a person is meichel to you, with his mouth, you could understand you could see, it's b'leiv shalom, it's a half a mechila, it's a quarter of a mechila, and you have to know. But if it's only based on shsika, the Alter Rebbe is pointing out to you, be careful that the shsika is not, you should not just take it for granted that a shsika is a mechila, even though min hastam it's a shsika, but if you know that it's not so, or that maybe the person, like Alter Rebbe writes in a different place about hezek re'iyah, that maybe the person is embarrassed to tell you that you shouldn't look into what he's doing. He's embarrassed. So if he's embarrassed, and he feels inferior to you, he's not going to tell you anything. So you have to realize when you're relying on the mechila, based on shika or even based on words, you have to realize that the mechila, you have to make sure that it's a mechila b'leiv shalom. And then Alter Rebbe finishes a sif at the b'nei reshus harabim. They can't be moichel unless it's shiva tu v'yair. And what I mentioned a few times already, oy shepashat amina glasses kain, kol mi sheroitze, that anybody could do this specific kind of somewhat of a hezek. Shaharei ze kilu moichelim kol anshe kulam befeirosh. That's the minhag, is everybody could do the specific kind of hezek, and everybody's moichel to each other. Why? Because each person understands that down the line he's also going to want to do it, and therefore he's not going to complain against you doing it, and therefore it's considered a mechila. It means if it's an agreement, if the minhag is, if there's a minhag, if it's customary to do this kinds of construction, or this kinds of noise, or this kinds of other things that you do in this city, and in this area, or in this building, then it's understood that everybody agreed to this specific hezek, because they also want to do it. For example, it comes to simple things. People build sukkahs outside. You have condos. People build sukkahs on the roof. People build sukkahs in the driveways, in the parking lot. Someone's going to complain, I can't bring my car in, right? That's the minhag. The minhag is neskabel that you block all the parking spots in sukkahs. That's part why, because just like the other 10 neighbors want to have a sukkah and they don't have a place in their house, because you can't put a sukkah under your roof. It has to be under the sky. So they agree that I want to put a sukkah, you want to put a sukkah. Each one of us is going to have to suffer a little bit for this week. Or if there's people fill up garbage, and there's after Yom Tov, everybody has Pesach, everybody has extra garbage. So it's part of life. You understand? You absorb it. You also want to do it. You didn't have a simcha this week. You're going to have a simcha in 6 months from now. They're doing Shabbat Brachas now, so you're going to complain? No, because in 3 months from now, you're also going to have a simcha. You're also going to have a big party. You're also going to have extra 10 bags of garbage, and you don't want him to complain about you. So it's part of Askamas B'nai Yoyid. Certain things we close our eyes to. Not everything, but certain things that we do, that's already considered Askama, that mechila from one to another. And it's not specifically called B'nai Yoyid when the Alter Rebbe says B'nai Yoyid. It means a group of people in a certain place. It could be people in the building, it could be people in the neighborhood, it could be people on the block, it could be people who share a driveway, people in one chutzner. It's all the same idea. The logic behind it is, if there's a general mechila, a general minhag, to do certain things that everybody waves, that doesn't say anything about it, it becomes like a general mechila. You don't have to specifically go and ask mechila from each person, or have the shiva tu v'yair, or when it comes to building the kanda board, do the mechila on your behalf.